Hi guys, welcome to another episode of T.N.T. Garage and Performance. And in this week's video, we're going to do a little kind of project checkup and see where we're at on every project in and outside of the shop. The reason being is, well, when you build budget things, you have to spend a lot of time looking for parts. And sometimes you have to wait some more to avoid spending the money to get it right now. So, as far as the square body project goes, we're kind of in limbo there, but we do want to go over a couple things, and I want to ask your opinion on a couple of things I'm going to do to that truck. Plus, kind of look at some of the other things that I've got going on or have planned. So let's get to it. Now, you guys are probably familiar with this 86 GMC C1500 that I am swapping the body onto a GMT 800 chassis with the 5.3 4L60 four-wheel drive, the frame, the whole mess. Now, when I bought the donor truck, the 99 Chevy, the frame has issues as most well-worn GMT 800s do. And really where I'm at a standstill is I would like to get another frame that's clean, transfer everything over to it. So I'm kind of in limbo waiting for that right opportunity to show up or have to drive a fair amount of distance to go get one. And that's really getting a few days off that I don't have to do anything else. I've been really busy lately between being on the road for 8-9 days at a crack, and also I'm adventuring and making myself healthier, both fitness wise and just general not eating like garbage all the time. So the healthier I am, the more I could be focused on projects like this. But as far as the parts go, I could find all the square body parts I need. That's pretty simple. But finding a clean GMT 800 regular cab long bed or even a regular cab short bed chassis it's not impossible, but it's hard to find one that either doesn't cost way too much for what it is, or B, finding one that doesn't already have the same issues, or finding one at all. So we might end up just fixing this frame. Now, on the Checker, I built the chassis from basically the rear doors forward. We don't have any issues. I could do the same with this, but it'd just be nicer to start with a clean frame, because if I do fix this one, we're going to have to get it blasted. We're going to have to get, repaint and all that, and that just adds extra time and obviously extra money. So if we can get into a chassis for $300 to $500 in that range, that's the route I'm going to go. But other than that, we've got it mocked up, and as far as the actual project goes, once we get the chassis either repaired or get a new one, this is going to go actually pretty quick. Other than some small body work on the cab, all we got to do is really make body mounts and then run all the wiring into the truck, and that's it. This was a running, driving 99 20 or 1500 Chevy. And once we get the body bolted down and get the wiring sorted, it's going to be a pretty simple project, even though at surface level it looks like a lot. But we're not altering a whole lot, by putting this body on it. So that's another thing I want to talk about, but we got to go inside the truck and kind of have a look at it so I can get your guys' kind of opinion on it. And I have some ideas, and you guys can let me know what you think of them. So let's go into the truck. All right, so now we're in the cab of the truck. I'm just sitting on this GMT 800 seat that's kind of temporarily cattywampused in here. I'm probably not going to go with these seats And the reason being is a lot of guys do put these in a square body. It's a popular swap. But you can't really shorten the frames on them to get them down lower because the rear seat, the seat back actually hinges down here. So you'd have to do a lot of modification, a lot of cutting, welding, and fabricating in order to shorten the brackets up to get this sitting down to where I'm 5'10", and I've got maybe 4 or 5 inches to my head to the roof. So, I mean, it makes it more comfortable leg-wise because your knees are up higher versus kind of how you sit in a square body. But the reason why I don't want to modify these seats is if you're going to use these seat belts that's attached to the seat back, it's all that strength is built in. It was engineered to be able to take that load of the seat belt get pulled on. So we might have to think of something else. I would like to have a modern set of seats in this truck that don't break the bank. Again, it's a budget thing, so, and it kind of hinges on what we're going to do as far as that goes. Now, do we do buckets with the jump seat, or do we do buckets with a console? And kind of what we're going to go into next will help us kind of decipher which way we should go. Now, we're putting a modern drivetrain in this truck using all the wiring. So we clearly have to address the factory square body gauges, which is a cable-driven speedometer, a electronic fuel gauge, electronic oil pressure, volt gauge, that's simple enough, and an electronic temp sensor. We can make these gauges work with the modern drivetrain, whether we tap into them or get, figure out if the output from the PCM is similar enough to run these, which is probably not, or just put, extra sensors in to run that stuff. The Speedo, you can get a electronic to mechanical converter. That's a little box that runs off of your PCM or your output speed sensor on the trans or your VSS, and converts that to run to a cable to run your speedometer. They're kind of noisy, but it is an option. Also, I do believe the later R and V series trucks and Suburbans, Blazers, stuff like that, post 88 and newer, so 88 to 91, I believe those did have an electronic speedometer. So you could swap one in and make that work. Now, you'd want a tack, right? Everyone wants a tack. So, we could do all this and convert it to electronic. And for a tack, I was thinking, if we're going to keep this layout, so just keep in mind, if we're keeping this layout. For a tack, I have a couple, actually, 3rd gen Camaro V8 tacks. Now, I do know that the signal coming from the PCM off of the 5.3 is more of a 4-cylinder pulse, and you'd either have to get a converter box or tune the PCM to put it out to 8-cylinder to make the tack work, but it is functional. Now, the nice thing about a 3rd gen Camaro tack is it has a built-in oil pressure gauge. And yes, the fonts are different than the square body stuff, but it's easy enough to make a new face to make it match. But it's got the oil pressure gauge in there, which means we can put a fuel gauge in here, which I know what you're going to say right now. Just put a fuel gauge where the clock is. I've got another idea for that. So, with some wizardry, we have the factory cluster for the 99. And that little message center is kind of handy, because this truck's going to have all the security. It's going to have the VAT system that the 99 had. All that's going to function. And having that and everything that comes up in the message center is kind of handy, especially seeing as, this isn't going to primarily be my truck. This is going to be my son's truck. So having that would be nice. Now, I'd have to do some research, but I think it'd be pretty neat to separate this message center, and it goes through all the, like the CAN bus up to the plug, whatever. But you should be able to isolate that. And I would like to put that little message center where the clock is. That would be a really neat thing to have that down there, so you have all your messages in this classic looking gauge cluster. So if we had the oil pressure gauge in attack, which by the way, this one goes to 80 psi, just like the 99 Silverado, the square bodies only went to 60. So we put that in there, have our oil pressure, put a fuel gauge there, I think that would solve our issue. Option number 2 is to use this cluster. I've seen guys do it. There's Duramax swaps out there that use the GMT 800 cluster, which if you get it repaired and it functions right, this one actually functions fine other than the display down here kind of winks out. As far as putting it in there, we'd have to change all of this. Now, I would not, under any circumstance, cut this bezel. I would remove the bezel, we'd remove the climate control, remove the AC vent, and just use this one down here, just kind of capping that one off. Or with the cluster here, set it up on its side, and I could make an aluminum panel to neatly hold this cluster, because we are going to use the GMT 800 column and steering wheel. So it's either going to clash with this, which I don't think it will. I do find the 98 and newer steering wheels a pretty attractive wheel, as opposed to like the 95 to 97 wheels. I think those were hideous and not near as cool as the 94 and older wheels, but I do enjoy the 98 up, kind of 4-spoke, small horn button Chevy steering wheels. So we could put this in here, but then we got to figure out something for our climate control. Now, if we go the old route, we can leave our climate control right there. We can leave the vents, we can leave the radio. Well, we'd leave the radio anyway. But we could leave all this alone and just modify it, have our message center, a fuel gauge, volt gauge, temp gauge, a newer electronic speedometer, and the Camaro tack with the oil pressure gauge in it. So if we go with this, we would have to go to moving our HVAC. That bleeds into, do we do bucket seats with a jump, or do we do a console and without cutting the dash, we just remove the ashtray and make a console that fits up to the dash like a modern truck does, where the console goes all the way up the dash. You got cup holders, phone holders, wireless charging, all that stuff. Get rid of the fuel tank switch, pull the ashtray out because you don't need it there. We can use what's inside there to secure the center console and have our HVAC and possibly like a modern radio kind of right in that area, and then have it come back into a nice center console. Would it look good with this? Probably not. So if we were to go the modern cluster route, seeing as we're going to have modern steering column and all that, we would use the GMT 800 HVAC controller, your fan speed, your temperature, and where it goes, put it in a center console over here, along with putting the HVAC box that's currently sitting on top of the engine from the 99 in here, and have all the modern HVAC stuff in this truck. And that really hinges on doing a full electronic conversion to the 99 style cluster, HVAC, and all that. If we stay with this square body style, we would keep these controls, we would keep the factory HVAC under the hood and make it work with the more modern stuff. And as far as the radio, this is a factory AM FM. I would probably remove it, put it on the shelf for safekeeping, and put in a Bluetooth version of this, and then an amp and some good speakers. If we do the console with the modern stuff, I would put like a Power Acoustic, makes a really nice like Apple CarPlay, Android Auto head unit that goes in there. So you'd have all the modern conveniences in this truck. So I'm kind of bouncing back and forth. Me personally, I would love to keep this. I do love the dash of these older GM vehicles. Pretty much anything that had round gauges in the Malaise area era in GM, all the way up to the late 80s. I loved the gauges. Round, set out nicely, usually had your auxiliary gauges set off to one side or off to the sides or direct in the center. They were just really, really attractive instrument panels. That being said, to have all the modern stuff and not have to monkey with any of the wiring, and then just plug this in, sink it into the dash, have a bezel to go around it, and, have like this same aluminum finish and everything like that, make it super clean. It would be pretty nice as well, especially having the modern conveniences, the modern HVAC, and a more modern radio, because I'm not going to cut the dash, put the radio in. I'm not going to do the glove box thing, have a radio in there, or any of that. One thing I am going to do, most likely, is figure out how to make this headlight switch work with the modern system. We may have to remove this vent and put the factory headlight switch from the 99 in there to make it work, but all in all, it'd stay factory. But let me know if you guys have any ideas, or if you want to see the modern cluster with more modern electronics in this truck, but still with the same basic layout of the rest of the truck. Or do you want to see a completely kind of custom square body setup with a 3rd gen tack and with this message center where the clock is? So let me know about that. Let me know what you think about doing buckets in a center console or just buckets with a jump seat. So that's where we are on the inside of the truck. We do have to get a new dash pad. It did finally crack. This was a really clean dash pad all the way up to, I think, last year. It only had a small little crack on the speaker grill, but finally we got a crack right here above the gauge cluster. And I did booger it a little bit when I was screwing around in here, getting it ready to pull the cab off the old frame. So we're still going to get a new dash pad regardless, but let me know what you think as far as this stuff goes. The rest of it, like as far as the cab goes, we got to put a rocker on it and do a new headliner, which I am going to put the center overhead console from the newer truck into this as well. So we have all that along with the rear view mirror. It's got the compass temp, all that stuff. So that pretty much wraps up where I'm at on the square body. And let's move on to the next project that I want to get cracking on pretty soon, because we're getting real close to winter here in Wisconsin, and I'd like to get it done before that comes. So I'm going to jump out of this and we're going to head over and address the next thing. Alright, so next we're moving on to Brute Farce, and this is the one I really want to address before winter time comes. Not because there's really anything particularly wrong with the truck, but I want to address the body. Now, this body is originally from Nebraska, I think from Nebraska, or Arkansas. It was at both places. The dates are a little fuzzy on it. But it's remarkably clean as far as the box goes. A lot of Rams not only rust here, they'll rust down here, and this will start flapping. So I did find patch panels on Amazon. They're insanely cheap. It's like $70 for both wheel arch patch panels. So I'm going to get those. This side is actually not that bad. The driver's side is starting to rust up into here, and I want to get that addressed before it gets worse, gets into the wheel well and all that stuff. So that is something that's going to be coming pretty soon. The second thing is under here, our rockers are actually pretty clean on this truck, and our cab corners are very, very clean. The only rust is right here on this side, and again on the driver's side, it's just a little bigger, and it starts to come into the rocker up here. So we're going to put at least partial rockers on this truck, probably from center of the door back, and repair this, because the pinch weld and the inner rocker is not rusty at all. The rust actually stops right before the pinch weld. So I want to get this done. I want to get the bedsides done. And there's a dent, if you look off that way, in the front fender, and one matching on the driver's rear. So we want to knock those out, get this sheet metal replaced, and at least get it into a good epoxy primer. And I'd probably just lay a quick coat of paint over it to get us through the winter, to keep that corrosion protection there. So we clean it up, replace the panel, do the body work we need to do to keep it straight, hit it with a primer sealer, then an epoxy, and then lay something over it. Because eventually I do want to paint the whole truck. But for now, we'll just match it with this already not so great intense blue paint job. So who cares? I'd rather have it be a little weird on the paint than have the rust. So we'll walk around the truck and talk about a couple other things that I do want to address on this. So one of which really needs to be done. So I'll bring you in quick to kind of look at the rust here. You could see it's really not bad on this side. And the reason why these rust is Dodge put kind of like a foam insulator in there that gathers moisture, and then it just starts blowing this out. But we got a little surface rust there. This is clean. This is clean. There's some Bondo there for some reason. A little rust there. Super clean. Like I said, the cab corners, look at that. Little bubble here, so we'll probably replace this up here. But other than that, this side on the truck is pretty good. The fenders aren't rusty. We've got some things to clean up here, and scratches and all that stuff. And I kind of mucked up the rear bumper moving stuff around. It was already rusty. So now we come to this side. You can see this is much worse. This is the salt side of the truck. In most states, the center line carries the most salt. You get it thrown up in here. Replace this. You can see this side is worse. The cab corner is still great, but we replace the rocker, that there, clean up the door, and this fender's not rusty either. Now the big issue that I do want to fix is we crawl underneath. You can see that this thing leaks more than I'd like it to leak, and it's the only fluid this truck leaks. You look at the engine, it doesn't leak any oil. It doesn't even burn oil. This truck's got 197,000 miles on it, and not a drop of oil, doesn't burn any, which is amazing, because this was a plow truck on a farm, and I beat the ever-living piss out of it. So, but the issue with the trans leak is, you see the bell crank up there with that little bushing, that little kind of whitish pink bushing? That goes on a shaft that goes through the case, and two things go on there. Not only your shift selection lever, but your throttle valve lever that goes inside of it. And there's a seal in the case that the whole assembly rides through, and then there's an O-ring that your throttle valve shaft rides through. And one of those two are leaking, if not both of them. Now you can disassemble all that and kind of pop the seal out for the main shaft and put a new one in with everything assembled. But to do the TV cable one, you have to pull the pan and the valve body down in order to get that all disassembled. I'm going to go pulling the pan down route, even though this is fresher fluid and I did do a band adjustment when I was in there. But this is an A618 or 47RE. And this is the trans that came behind the Cummins trucks and these V10s. And I hate this transmission. I don't hate it because it's a bad transmission. I'm used to the A518 or the 46s that have a more normal shift pattern. It's 1, 2, 3, lock up, fourth. This will lock up sooner, and it's very rough. They shift weird, and I don't like it. So if I'm going to pull the valve body down while I'm in there, I'm just going to put a shift kit in it, a shift reprogramming to make it shift like an A518. Because even though this engine makes, I think, 445 or 450 foot-pounds of torque, we've got a relatively low gear ratio at 410s, 411s. I think it's 411s. One of the two, 410s. I don't care. But, cement truck. But if we reprogram this to shift like an A518-1, the truck will accelerate better and just get firmer shifts in it. Now this thing doesn't slip shift at all or have any real issues. I hate the way it shifts and it leaks fluid. So if we're going to fix the fluid leak, I'm going to make it shift better. So that is one thing definitely got to address, because not only does it, I have to put fluid in it every now and then, obviously, but it gets on the exhaust crossover here from the driver's side. And if it's been sitting for a while and you fire it up, it smokes. You know, you just see smoke kind of wafting out from underneath the truck as it's burning off the, transmission fluid that dripped on it. And as we all know, transmission fluid is quite flammable. So if you get a lot of it on a really hot exhaust pipe, you are going to have a fire. So that is something I want to address there. So the next thing is we need to touch up this interior. Now, again, on Amazon, you can actually get a new lower seat cover and cushion. So we're going to replace this. And, not so much that it's uncomfortable, but I'm tired of it raining foam on the floor, because I do try to keep this truck relatively clean. And they do make like new covers that kind of drop on over this. I mean, I'm get the cup holder that goes on the front, because those are useless, because this is a manual transmission truck, and those cup holders are very, very much not good. So we'll do that. We're going to put a windshield in it, and that leads me to lighting. Now, these aren't the worst I've seen, but they suck. So I want to get new housings. We're probably going to just stick with factory style, put better bulbs in them. Sorry about the wind. But we'll put all new mounts and everything in there, because the turn signals are falling off, and I just ran some sheetrock screws in to keep them there. I have a set of fog lights, so we're going to update the lighting and put the cab lights on this truck, because on the old body, this truck did come with cab lights. Since this is a half ton, doesn't have them, and I want them. I did take the topper off too and put my tonneau cover on here, just because I get bored really easily and I don't like spending money. So if I have crap laying around, I'll change it up, because, well, that's how we do it. So that is what we're going to be doing on Brute Farce in the near future, maybe even before we get too far on the square body, because this truck is far from my daily driver. I drive it back and forth to the shop where my big rig sits, and it's about a 35-mile trip one way. Maybe drive it once a week unless I need it to haul something or I'm at home and moving stuff around. So this truck really doesn't go far, but I just want it to be nicer, because it's getting harder and harder to find a clean second gen Ram that's got enough power to actually do anything without spending the money to get a Cummins. So let's kind of move on. Let's talk about the checker and a couple of changes I want to make on that. All right, so as far as other projects go, like the checker obviously was a massive project. There was so much that went into this car. The sheer amount of steel that went into this car is mind-boggling, and it all had to be hand fabricated, because, well, they don't make anything for it. As far as, like, you could get fiberglass quarters, fenders, stuff like that, but you cannot get floor pans and anything associated with the frame other than some suspension components. So this is a very much hand fabricated from scratch car with a really crappy shell on it. That being said, this car has been probably one of the most reliable vehicles outside of the Challenger that I've ever had. The Tunnel Ram 350 always runs amazing. Plenty of power. The 4-speed I rebuilt's doing great. There's really nothing to complain about this car, other than two things, really. The steering box I have in it, which is a Vega box, it was more of a budget one that I got from Summit, and it works, but there's more kind of on-center free play, and it is adjusted the way it should be. there's just a little more play than what I'd want. So I might have to upgrade to a higher end steering box, kind of get that slop out of it, because I'm using Heim joints for the steering. There's no slop in those. I'm using good U joints for the steering shaft, so that's not where it's coming from. It's all in the steering box. And before I really put more miles on this car, I want to address that. It goes down the road fine. It drives dead straight. I'm not worried about that. I could use it forever. I just don't like it. So we'll probably get a higher end Vega box to put in here. Now the second thing that I want to change on this car is when I decided to convert this to a 4-speed, obviously I need a clutch pedal and I need some way to actuate the clutch. And since, yes, they did make manual transmission checkers, it was all mechanical stuff. And trying to find a clutch pedal for a checker, it may have been shared with other vehicles and they may have borrowed it, but trying to find one would have cost more than just putting a Willwood pedal in it. So I've got a Willwood clutch pedal. I've got a Speedway stock style hydraulic throwout bearing. So there's no external slave, no mechanical linkage. Everything is inside the bell housing between the transmission and the clutch. And that works great. The downfall is I've got the recommended 3/4 inch bore master cylinder in this. The problem with that is you can see like the height of the clutch pedal. My foot's on the brake and I could literally slide my foot straight over behind the clutch pedal. And you have to push it all the way to the floor to disengage the clutch. And it's not like it's still grabbing. It does disengage it. But you got to put it all the way to the floor, and you've got a lot of pedal travel with that 3/4 inch bore master. So I want to swap to a 7/8 inch master or a 1 inch. I think 7/8 might fix our issue. And the difference between smaller bore is it creates more pressure with a longer throw, whereas a bigger bore is more pressure with a shorter throw or volume or however you want to put it. So that would make the pedal shorter, and we'd also then have to address to make sure we're not going to overstroke our throwout bearing. And the reason being is if you have too much stroke and too much volume going to your throwout bearing, it could over travel, blow the seal out, then you're leaking fluid everywhere. This one does have a clip on it to keep it from over traveling, but putting the other master in, we'll have to set our pedal to where basically when it hits the firewall is just after it disengages the clutch, giving a little room for wear, and that way we won't be overstroking or putting way too much pressure on our throwout bearing, but at the same time lowering the overall height of our pedal and getting a shorter stroke out of it, as well as getting a firmer pedal. Because this car is interesting to drive because it's manual steering, so you got to put some work in. It's a heavy control. The 4-speed, not super heavy, but a heavy enough control. The brakes are manual, so that's a heavy pedal. And then we got a featherweight clutch pedal, so you're kind of off balance driving this car. And then I get my Challenger and I can hardly drive it because the clutch throw is only this far and everything's balanced. So going with a bigger bore master will shorten our pedal travel and give us a firmer pedal. And that's really all I want to do to this car. It's been so awesome. It fires right up. You know, everyone always says, oh, you can't have a tunnel ram on the street. You pump this pedal twice and crank and it fires. If it's warm, you bump the key and it fires. And other than having mechanical secondary carbs on this, it's very easy to drive on the street with a manual transmission even. Yes, if you jump into it at low RPM in a gear, it's going to bog and cough because it's a mechanical secondary carb. There's no torque converter flash to take up for it. So once you get it rolling and you get it to where it'll accept all the fuel and air, she goes no problem, and you can drive it like a pussycat otherwise. So that pretty much wraps up the checker. And yeah, there's not much to say with this. So as far as those projects go, that's kind of where we're at. And this is drivable just the way it is. So I'm not in a rush to do it. If anything, in the terms of priority, it's Brute Farce so it doesn't rust out worse. And then on a square body, we got one more project to talk about. And I know because I've been procrastinating on it forever and it's just getting covered in more crap. So let's go over to that. Remember when I said covered in crap and buried? Ugh. All right. So, back here, it's just been a shelf for everything. Until I get the rest of my drywall up in the garage, I want to build a shelf so I can put a sled up on it. This is my 1980 Scorpion TK 440. Now, if you haven't seen the video, I suggest to check it out. There's some good history, and these were some of the fastest sleds back in the late 70s and 1980 because they're incredibly light, and the 440 fan-cooled motor in them made probably 50-ish horsepower, maybe a little more. And they were fun, quick sleds. And my dad had a bunch of them. We worked on a bunch of them growing up, along with a bunch of other Scorpions, Polarises, Skidoos. I had a snow jet. You know, we had everything. But this I do want to drag out, which means I got to move the square body out. I've got to get rid of all the cardboard boxes for parts and get my steel organized and all that. But I do want to get moving on this sled. Also, what it needs is the engine's in it. Everything's there. I mean, this is 100% complete. From the Mikuni PowerJet carb to all the airbox, everything is on this sled. It just doesn't have spark. Even when you unplug everything, there's no spark. So the points are probably a little gummed up. So I'd like to clean those, see if we can't get this Cuyuna running. I do plan on putting a different engine in it that's more reliable. Cuyunas, although fun and fast, when they start blowing up, they keep blowing up. Every time. Kind of like an early Polaris triple. But I want to see if we can get this running. And if I can, I have to fix the rear suspension. Any of you Scorpion guys know, or anyone with older sleds, is there's swing arms in these suspensions. It's usually a rod through a tube, and your swing arm off that pivots on the interior rod. This one is seized in the rear. I cannot find a swing arm for this for the life of me. Of course, I don't have time to go to swap meets. So, with a lot of work, I could probably get it freed up and reassemble the rear suspension, put new bogies on it. The track's in good shape. The drivers are in good shape. I mean, the seat's mint. The hood, other than like the webbing cracks from being moved 1,000 times, is in tremendous shape. I want to get this sled mobile because it's Wisconsin. And we have been getting quite a bit of snow in my particular area the last few years. Kind of all at once, and then you have a month to play in it, and then it's gone. But I want to get this going. And just to putt around with it and have some fun. And just kind of leave it like this for now. Eventually, I do want to do like a full restoration. Just have a very beautiful kind of my take on a Scorpion TK. Changing the colors up a little bit. Kind of going back into Scorpion's history on how they did things. But I do want to get this going probably around Thanksgiving, because it really doesn't start snowing here until January anymore. But I want to get this cleaned up, get all the crap off of it, and get it put back together and have some fun with it. If we can get the Cuyuna running and at least ride it till it inevitably blows up, we can have some fun with it. And it's buried. Let me just trip over everything. If I remember right, it doesn't have many miles on it. If this is the factory speedometer, it's only showing 1,100 miles on the clock. Which, back in the day, high miles on a sled was start get up to 3,000 miles, stuff like that, especially on this older stuff. Or if you had a Cuyuna, high miles were 600. But this one has relatively low miles on the engine and chassis. So there is a chance if we can get this thing to create spark we can get it to run for a while. And then once we start doing more fun stuff with it, put a more reliable, another fan cooled engine in it with the same or more power, and just have a fun buzz around sled, take the show, stuff like that. So let's, I need to figure out how to get out of here because I had to climb over the truck to get in. So let's finish this video up. Well, so that pretty much wraps this video up of checking in on the state of all the projects around here. And, well, I haven't been super busy working on stuff because, like I said, I've been incredibly busy elsewhere. And to me, right now, like, my physical health is pretty important, and I'm on a hard drive of taking care of that. But I'm also keeping these projects in the back of my mind. I bench race a lot, what I should do, what I shouldn't do, and it kind of waiting on a lot of material for this and just, you know, the inspiration to, you know, start tearing it in further and kind of making some big changes. So this, pretty much your big thing is the frame, but we can still work on cab stuff, and that will be coming up once I decide which direction to go inside. So like I said, comment down below. Let me know which direction you think I should take. And no, I'm not going to go out and buy like the Holly gauges or whoever makes them, the Dakota digital gauges or any of them, because have you seen the price on those? We ain't doing that. So that's more than this whole truck is worth. We're not doing that. We're going to make something custom because if you could get it off the shelf, why not make it? It's yours then. So that's where that is. The checker's been phenomenal. Brute Farce needs a little tweaking just to keep it around for a few more seasons. And the snowmobile. So hopefully I could get the time. And, you know, the problem with being on the road for as long as I have been lately is when you're on a stretch for that long, you get done, you don't want to do anything. You just kind of want to be done with the world, you know? So if I could get a couple of weeks to where it's 4 or 5 days out, to where I'm a little more refreshed when I get back, we could really start pounding on this. Other than that, I just kind of force myself to do stuff. And we're going to do, probably, if we find a chassis, a road trip. Plus, we need to find a bed. So that stuff will be coming. And just in general, we're not a complete standstill. There's still stuff to do. It's just the motivation and squeezing it in a time of everything else I've got going on. So there we go. Hopefully you enjoyed this, and if you're interested in any of the build-ups of these projects, check out any of the playlists. The playlist on the original build of this truck, when I basically bought it back and we just jammed the 700 R4 in it and a hot little 350, and up to its current state to where it had been disembodied and put on a newer truck. Then you got the checker. There's a whole series on the insane build on this car that was done in a very short amount of time given how much I'm actually home. Of course, there's always Brute Farce, which is an all-around fun truck to have to work on that gets battleship fuel economy, but has been a very good second-gen Ram. You got the snowmobile and the 2 campers. Check those out. Those are projects that don't need to be done right now. Those could be spring things. So one's going to go in storage with my red Ram. The other one's going to get moved up into a safe spot and just be preserved for the winter. And I think that pretty much wraps it up. So go ahead, like, share, and subscribe. Hit the little bell icon because YouTube is really bad at letting anyone know when videos come out. Like, I have a ton of subscriptions, and half of them I don't know when there's new videos. So make sure, A, you're subscribed, and that you're getting notifications. So, other than that, you can follow me on social media. The links are down in the description. Lots of words there. Brain isn't working too good today, but go ahead, do all that, and remember, until next time, if it ain't broke, fix it till it is. We'll see you soon.